Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
We're very excited today. We are doing a recording with a guest. But before we launch into what we're going to be talking about and who we're going to be talking about it with, some quick promotion. First of all, we want to thank our new Patreon. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Christina, thank you so much for supporting us and the podcast. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Christina.
If you would also like to support the podcast and get a shout out and other nifty rewards, you can do that at patreon.com/dbtandme. You can also check out our Etsy store. That is etsy.com/shop/dbtandme. Give us a rate and review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that you might be listening to us. It's super helpful. If you have questions, ideas, or anything you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear from our listeners at dbtandmepodcast@gmail.com. So we're here today with Katie May. I'll let her do more introducing of herself in a moment here, but we're going to talk all about using DBT with teens today. So, Katie, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to listeners.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michelle and Kate. I'm so excited to be here. My name, as you said, is Katie May, and I own Creative Healing. It is a series of teen support centers in the greater Philadelphia area. We specialize in DBT for the adolescent brain, so about 12 to 24, 26, and have devoted our lives to adolescent mental health. So I'm psyched to dig in and talk all about that today.
Yeah. Well, we're really excited to have you here because I think Kate and I have probably mentioned this more than once on the podcast, but when we lead groups, we don't lead groups with teens. We only facilitate groups for adults. So to have you on here today to really talk about how people who are clinicians can use DBT with teens, but also like for our listeners who have teen children, like just how to make DBT accessible for teens is just really exciting for us that that's your jam and that you could really speak to that when it's not our jam and it's not what we do. So
nope, totally.
Yeah. So I don't know, I guess to kick it off, Katie, like for yourself, how did you first come across DBT? Like what appealed to you about it and what made you decide that this was the work that you wanted to do?
I love this question because I really fell into DBT backwards. I'm sure that's like a lot of people's story, but I myself struggled as a teen. I was what I would probably call a trouble teen and experienced a lot of the behaviors that people come to DBT for, but I didn't get DBT treatment and I didn't know what it was. I found ways through my own life to cope and be resilient and overcome some of the struggles that I was experiencing. And so when I was in grad school to be a therapist, still didn't know what DBT was. But I learned through my first position. I was working at a partial hospital program and somebody came in and trained on DBT. And I was like, holy shit, these are all of the things that I did to help myself through my life. And there's actually like a name and a pretty package for them. I know how to do this and I believe in it because I know that it works because it's things that I've done for myself. And so that's really where I fell in love with DBT as a modality. I was really great at, validating and expressive arts, but that like concrete piece in a clinical sense was missing for me. And so when I found it, I was just like, the stars are aligned. It's perfect. And I ran from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds pretty similar to your story, actually, Kate, with
I did get into DBT, yes, though I was a little bit lucky in that sense as a teenager, but it was the same thing. I was like, I needed these and they worked for me. And it's a big part of what has led me to wanting to share it with others. What is your favorite thing about DBT? A lot of things that Michelle and I talk about are, how there's sort of things that draw people to it and things that maybe people like less. So yeah, I'm curious what's on your favorite side and maybe what would you change if you had the opportunity to do so?
So favorite things about DBT, one, the piece about validation, just feeling like we need to accept before we can move into change. I think as a person who values validation and reinforcement, it just feels like it makes so much sense. And it's something that I want all of my clients and people around me to experience, like you are valid, what you experienced makes sense, all of those things. And as a therapist, what I really like about it is the idea of finding the root function of behaviors, not jumping too quickly to coping or change before we really realize what it is that we're treating. And so using tools like behavior chains and other things with other interventions in session in order to understand, like, what's the function of this behavior, what's keeping it in place, and how can we rework these patterns so that you start to shift into more effective behaviors. That's something that I've seen just as a game changer in my work, and in, you know, clients giving me the feedback that they feel like I get them, I understand them, and that I can actually help them rather than other therapists who have just held space or, you know, repeated back what they're saying, which has its place and its value. But for the types of high-risk clients that I see, they need more than that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And on the other side of things, about the less excited or things you might tweak or change, what's that for you?
So, all right, let me think about this, because there's really nothing specifically about DBT itself that I would change, but I would change the understanding and implementation of it with certain clinicians. And what I find is that people can be too rigid with it and too like follow the rulesy, which is really kind of a trigger in my life anyway, when somebody is too rigid and has to follow all the rules and can't think outside of that box. So that frustrates me, because I think we lose the humanness in DBT when we're just following rules and we're forgetting that we're not working with a computer program, we're working with a person. And then the other thing is the misunderstanding when people hear DBT and they just think about a skills group, and they don't understand that there are all these other components that make it work so well together. Because we'll have clients that come to us and they'll say, I tried DBT and it didn't work, but they didn't actually try DBT. They tried one part of DBT, and then they feel defeated before they even start the treatment that I believe is going to help them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The rigidity, I think, is something that Michelle and I push back against a lot as well. So, really aligned in that sort of values around that.
Yeah, definitely. So if we shift a little bit from, like, you know, how you came into DBT and your thoughts on it, and really start diving into how DBT works really well with teens, what do you think it is about DBT that the population that you work with, like, why do teens like DBT? Like, what draws them to it, and how or why does it work so well for them?
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that teens really appreciate about DBT is the concreteness and the answers, or at least like the formula in how to move forward with certain things. For example, a dear man, a way to assert yourself with your peers, can feel really anxiety provoking for anyone, but especially a teenager who, you know, developmentally values their peer relationships so much. And so when we can provide them with a structure or a framework and help them practice it, it almost like it regulates or it calms the brain to say, like, okay, there's a path to follow, so I'm not, you know, so stressed out in the moment. So I think that concrete part of it is really relevant for our teens. And I also think, like, you know, we look at a lot of therapy where we're looking at your childhood and we're looking at your history. Well, like, I work with 13-year-olds, so they're in their childhood. So some of those other types of therapy are just not as relevant for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could imagine it being, too, with a little bit what you're talking about, like more, depth-oriented approaches, or like focusing more on the past. They're probably like, I don't really care about how this problem with my friend relates to something I've experienced before. I just want you to help my friend like me again. Like, help me solve this problem in the here and the now. What can I start doing immediately to try to fix it or make it better? And so that actually makes a lot of sense for why they would want DBT, because exactly as you put it, it gives them that path to resolving whatever they might be having a struggle with at the time.
Yeah, it's very actionable. And that's the part where they can latch onto it and do something with it, which feels good for them.
Totally. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's, I don't know, you may have been it if you had been offered it as a teen. I know, thankfully, I was able to be like, yes, I want that when I was offered it as a teen. And I think we also know that there are plenty of teens out there who could really benefit from DBT who maybe are resistant to the idea of it for one reason or another. Do you have any tips or ideas for parents or caregivers who would really like to see their teenager engage in DBT but are facing a lot of resistance or having a real struggle there?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that because I'll speak for myself and then for my team. And I manage 20 therapists in my team. So I personally don't have a lot of problems getting my teens into DBT treatment. Yeah. And I think a big part of that is that I'm the therapist who is seeing this client when they've been hospitalized 3 times. They've seen 11 other therapists. So I'm like the end of the road therapist, the one that's like, this is the last thing that I want to try because nothing else has worked. And so I think to that end, there's been so much strife and pain and challenge that it's like the pain is enough to motivate them to try the thing that I'm saying is going to help them. And so that's like one piece of it that I want to hold is sometimes the pain needs to be motivating enough for somebody to move forward with a treatment that is a big commitment, right? It's a skills group, it's individual therapy, it's all these other things. But I notice with my therapists, especially my newer therapists, they have more trouble getting that commitment to DBT treatment. And so I would go back to thinking about what I call the storm and the sunshine, the storm being the pain that they're in right now. Here's what you're experiencing. You're depressed. You have suicidal thoughts. You're really struggling at school. You're having these anxiety thoughts that nobody likes you. Like, that sucks. That's a hard way to live. But what you've told me is that your life worth living is that you want to go to college and buy that dream car and live with 3 cats, and really helping them tease out like the before and after picture, and then supplying DBT as that bridge between the two of them. So I think sometimes we focus too much on do this thing, this is the treatment, but I don't really focus on the treatment. I focus on the person and where they are and what they want, and that seems to move the process along.
Okay. So maybe something more along the lines of not like, here, let me convince you to do DBT, but like, hey, I think let's align on this future that you're looking for together. And like, maybe this is a bridge to get there. This is a way to achieve those goals.
Exactly. And with parents specifically, they do ask, like, how do I get my teen into treatment? And a lot of them, not a lot of them, but I would say some teens just aren't ready, or they're being willful and they're not at a place where they're motivated to do their own treatment. And I would absolutely recommend that those parents themselves go through a course of treatment, because there's so much in working with teens about structuring the environment, learning how you can respond in ways that's going to be more effective. There's actually some research that supports like changing the parent and environment behaviors at home can change teen behaviors without them even being in treatment. Yeah. So I wouldn't want anyone to lose hope that just because their teen's not in care that they can't make some changes within the home.
Yeah. Well, and I really like that idea of the storm and the sunshine too, because I think so often it's really easy to focus on the storm, to be like, yeah, you need to get help of some kind because there's all these things going on, right? Like, you're missing so much school and, you know, whatever it may be. And that's what's, of course, like stressing the parents out is the storm. And so it's really hard to be able to look towards the sunshine and to be able to talk about that. But you're totally right. Like, rather than approaching it from these are the issues that need to change, hey, these are the things that you want to get to. And I want to support you in getting to those like really positive things, and like just reframing the conversation could be such a game changer.
Exactly. And I would also say being careful not to pathologize the teen in the sense of like, these are all the behaviors that you suck at. And so we need to make sure that you get into treatment, taking some ownership as a parent to say like, I'm struggling with how to navigate this school avoidance process. So we as a family are going to seek support so that we can all feel better at home. And I think that feels more aligned for teens that often feel like I'm doing all this work and like my mom's just dropping me off and going to the store and then coming back to pick me up. And so really everyone investing in the process is important.
Yeah, nobody's going to want to hear that they are the problem, right? Like, I don't want to be told I'm the problem with anything. So of course, right? You know, teens aren't going to want to be told that either. Just as humans, I think that approach is not gonna cut it or work so well. So, yeah.
Exactly.
I guess I wonder too, like, so when you're either like leading skills groups or doing individual therapy with teens, what are some things that you've learned over your years of doing this for how to, I don't know, maybe make some like adjustments from, like we were saying earlier, the rigid DBT, the way that we traditionally think about it? How do you change it for teens so that it is more approachable and that they do really want to engage with it?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a story of what didn't work for me in the past, and then we'll get to what does work.
I love it.
In my first job, in my first job, I worked in a partial hospital program, and I had in my internship worked in like adult domestic violence and run groups there where people just came in and they were like blah, and they said all the things and they would talk, and really I just sat and facilitated some connections. And so I came into this partial hospital program and I was shadowing the person who was running the teen groups, and I was like too big for my britches, and I was like, I could do this, I've been doing this for a while, let me just jump in. And he was like, sure, like here's the manual, jump in, do the group. And so I stood in front of this group of teenagers who are all in this partial hospital program, and I started trying to lead group with a prompt, and they all just stared at me with the most judgmental faces because I was expecting them to just spontaneously like chat and connect. And then I gave the book back to the dude who was running group and was like, I don't want to do this, never mind. And I felt so much embarrassment and shame, but it was a great learning moment for me that teenagers interact differently in groups than adults. They don't talk as much spontaneously. They're not always as ready to share their examples. There's definitely a greater element of not wanting to embarrass themselves, not wanting to be the first person to talk. And so in our DBT skills groups, we do a lot of interactive activities and games and hands-on art activities. And we really structure more of that practice time. So for example, we might teach a skill using, I don't know if you're familiar with Jamboard, like it's an interactive online whiteboard.
Oh, that's cool.
And we have a smart board in our group room, so they can like add things from their phones and add it up on the board as we're teaching a skill. And then maybe we're having them do like a self-soothe box where they're decorating the box and they're putting in different cotton balls with essential oils. And we just get really creative, and then we ask them how they apply those things to their everyday life. And that kind of fills the space, and they can naturally chat and connect within that and start to apply the skills. But I think it's less about just the conversation and more about the hands-on and interaction that we're facilitating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like if you're just going to stand up there and talk about this is what the skill is, what do you all think about it, right? Yeah, you're gonna just get crickets.
You're gonna get those judgmental faces and sit right down. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I love that idea of incorporating a lot of art. I think that's great because it uses a totally different part of our brain to engage in art and to do something creative. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's developmentally appropriate too. I think our teens are still finding their words for these experiences. And so when they have something else to support them in that process, it really brings out more of their experience when they're able to use something else to kind of project onto and talk about what's happening for them. We have a cookbook for all of our groups. So our therapists put together like activities, art. And so it is like a little recipe for each of our groups that we're able to implement. It's really cool.
I love that. That's very cool.
Yeah. That's really awesome.
So I'm sensing some themes in what you're talking about. So I'm betting we might have some ideas here, but I am curious if there are some skills that teens do just sort of seem more naturally drawn to and ones that they're a little bit more resistant to, perhaps. Like, do you notice preferences, things like that going on?
Yeah. So I will say a lot of our teens really like the tip skill, and I have a teenager as well, and right now they are in DBT skills group because I think the skills are helpful for everyone, and pandemic and depression and all of these things have led us to, okay, these are skills that I wish I had as a teenager, and now I want you to have. This is like my gift to you for a life that's worth loving, like all of those things. And so they came down after one group, and I was like, what skill did you learn today? And he said, the tip skill. And I was like, oh, I love the tip skill. He said, yeah, Molly does too. You DBT therapists fucking love your tip skills. And so it's like, I could not help but laugh, like he was being sassy. But it's true. Like we do and they do. So.
Yep, that's funny. That is awesome. Is there something that you find that they're more like, nope, like not interested, don't want that one?
I think one of the harder ones for us to teach with teens is radical acceptance. I would say that as a person and the parent of a teen, like radical acceptance is my go-to skill. I believe that there's a huge grieving process in having a teenager, somebody who's becoming more autonomous as you're like, oh, I used to hold this baby and now I can't, I have no idea where you are or what you're doing. And like, there's just a lot of grieving. And so when I'm working with parents of teens, radical acceptance is one that is so relevant. And our parent DBT groups, like we could have a 3-hour group on radical acceptance, but for our teens, it's just a little bit more abstract and harder for them to grasp. And they don't want to accept things. They want to feel the way that they feel and they want to cope with it and get rid of it. I shouldn't generalize that. Some of them do. It's harder to accept. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I think Michelle and I consistently say that radical acceptance is the hardest DBT skill, like super applicable and useful and can be life-changing and real fucking hard. And so that makes a lot of sense. And that abstractness, right? I can imagine being a struggle as well. Like not so tangible, right? As like go and stick your face in a bucket of ice water. Like, okay, I can do that. I can check that box. That's easy.
Exactly. Well, I feel like the pandemic actually made it easier to teach radical acceptance because there were more concrete examples, but it's still hard.
That's fair. That's fair. That makes sense.
Yep. We were all having to radically accept what was
a lot
going on. Yeah, definitely. I wonder too, like you said, you manage a team of 20 therapists with your group practice. So what's the biggest piece of advice that you give to them when it comes to working with teens? Because we have a number of listeners who are also clinicians who work in all kinds of settings, but we get questions regularly from listeners about, hey, I'm about to like lead my first group, or I'm, just wanting to know more about DBT so I can impart it to the clients that I work with. So for those out there who are working with teens, what's the biggest thing that you could share with them of like, keep this in mind when you're starting to use DBT?
Yes. Okay. So radical genuineness, being yourself. You know that teens can sniff out inauthenticity like that. They will call you on your bullshit and they will never come back if you're being fake. And so not to be dramatic, but that will happen.
Yeah.
So I think being yourself is really important. And this goes back to that piece that about like following the rules. I think new DBT therapists, they want to do it right. And so they're really concerned about following the rules. But I think falling back on the idea that doing DBT means being effective and doing what works with the client that's in the room with you. So being willing to, do what works with the client in front of you, even if you're afraid that you're breaking the rules. It doesn't really matter. There's no DBT police effective that are going to come after you. Right, exactly. And then I would say be willing to, not feel like you have to be the expert. There are times when I'm like, oh, I think this skill would be good. Let me grab my book. I'm not going to remember how to say it to you, but let's read through it together and let's talk about it. And just like being okay being fallible, because modeling that is going to be really helpful for our teens, for anyone.
Yeah. It seems like what you're really honing in on there is like, it's less about how you're teaching the skills, and it's more important that you really know yourself and that you can really like embrace who you are, embrace your imperfections. Because, exactly as you put it, like that is going to be a lifelong lesson for these teens to learn when they're in this stage of life. At least I know I was as a teen, where it's just kind of like I wanted to do everything perfectly. I didn't want to make mistakes. Mistakes were mortifying. Mistakes felt like the end of the world. And so when you can show them like, I'm not perfect, and it's okay. And I'm not going to try to pretend to be this expert here, because like you said, that's going to totally turn them off to the whole thing and to trusting you. Like, that's going to be bigger than any skill that you would actually teach, is to start from that place.
Exactly. I mean, DBT is principle based, right? We're not following a curriculum. I mean, I know skills group is, but like we're not following an overall protocol. We're using these ideas and we're interjecting them into our sessions in a way that works for the clients that are in front of us. And I think that's the most important piece, is like maintaining your humanness in the process.
Yeah. You show up in the room, right? If you're asking them to show up, that you show up also.
100%.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, the rumor has it, you have a book coming out soon. We'd love to hear more about it.
The rumor is true. Yeah, so I am writing a book. It's actually been my goal since I was 6 to write a book. I feel that my life story is interjected in this book. So what it is it's a book for parents of teens who self-harm, and it is my story as a teen growing up, interwoven with my experience as a therapist who specializes in teen self-harm. What I like to tell people is my dad always said that there was no parenting book for how to parent a teen like me. So I said, I'm going to write that one, and that's what I'm doing. So it will be out next year, but for anyone who's curious, you can follow me on social media. I'm sharing like little bits of it as we go along until it comes out.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh man, you know what? I don't think I'd ever thought of that, but I can imagine how needed that is, right? I was also a teen who self-harmed. I imagine my parents probably would have appreciated something like that being available, and nothing certainly was anywhere close to available at that time. So that is really awesome, and probably a much needed resource, right, to be putting out into the world.
I think so.
Yeah. And I'm also wondering too, I mean, I know we were throwing of course, a bunch of questions at you today with this episode, because that's what we're here to do, is ask these questions and hear your really insightful responses and answers that you have. But are there any other things that you really want to make sure to share with our audience? Any other things that you would want to add in for people to take away with this topic of using DBT with teens that we didn't ask you and didn't talk about so far?
I would say remembering that every relationship is transactional. And you can think of this like a dance. And I'm thinking of parents specifically. Like if your teen steps back, you might step forward. But if you don't want them to step back, stop stepping forward. And so in that regard, considering what are the behaviors that I'm doing as a parent that are influencing my teen's behavior? What are my behaviors as a therapist that are influencing my client's behavior in front of me? But especially for our teens, because they're not independent and autonomous and living on their own. Like there's so much of their environment that influences what's happening for them that it feels really impossible to separate out parents working on their own targets or goals. Like if, I used to be a yeller, so working on not yelling anymore and using other strategies was really important to help my teen manage their anxiety, like things like that. Just owning your part in this system of things that are happening in your home is something to really reflect on. I don't know, earlier, Michelle, you said nobody likes to think that they're the problem. I think as a parent, like I always think I'm the problem. I went through grad school and I asked a million teachers, like, you're telling me I'm going to mess up my kid no matter what? And they were like, yes, you are. So I think like not feeling shame or blame, but just owning that we all have a part in what created this. And so we can all have a part in the solution as well.
Yeah, that's a really great approach. And I mean, that's right. That's so dialectical. It's all of us, right? It's everybody. Yes. It's not just this person is right and this person is wrong, right? I'm right and my child is wrong. It's not that at all. It's that everybody plays a role and everybody is a piece of the puzzle of change and having things shift or be different in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I know you already mentioned that people can follow you on social media if they want to hear more updates about your book. So, like, what's your Instagram handle, or like, what's your website if people want to find you there?
Yes, so creativehealingphilly.com for the website, and on Instagram and Facebook, you can find us at Creative Healing.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
All right. Jinx, Michelle.
Jinx.
We've been doing this too long together. We sound too much alike. I think, then that just brings us to the closing moment. Before launching into it, I did want to talk a little bit about what it is and why it's what we chose today. Today, I'll be leading you guys through some progressive muscle relaxation. If you're longtime listeners, you probably recognize that as one of the tips from tip. Nice. One of the elements of the skill tip. And one of the reasons that we chose that is because we were talking with Katie before the start of the episode about what does and doesn't work best for teens. And they were talking about that, right? Physical movement, physical involvement, right? Like getting their body in as a part of mindfulness exercises can be really helpful to keep them there, right? To stay present and stay interested and stay active in the mindfulness exercise. And so, yeah, progressive muscle relaxation is pretty physical. And so, yeah, that's what we chose and why. I will say this is one that's maybe a little weird to lead without you being able to see it, but I will do my best to describe it in a way that makes sense and so that folks can follow along. So, yeah. With that introduction, I think we're ready to get going. So if you want to get into a comfortable position, whatever that means for you today, though we will be using your hands and feet and other parts of your body. So if you can have those available, that would be great. And if you're safe and feel comfortable doing so, I invite you to go ahead and close your eyes. As per usual, we're going to start by just noticing our breath. You don't need to breathe any more slowly or any more deeply than you are naturally. And this is just about tuning in. This is about really focusing in on the rhythms and the sensations of your breath and letting them welcome you into your body and into the present moment. So for progressive muscle relaxation, what we're going to be practicing is intentionally clenching really hard, or flexing, if that's a better description for that part of the body, the muscles, right, in different select parts of our body. We're going to hold it tight, tight, tight for a few seconds, and then we're going to intentionally release, right? Relax all of those muscles all at once. Right? Maybe even while saying either out loud or in your mind to yourself, let go, release, relax, whatever one of those terms resonates the most for you. Right? Part of this idea is if we're tense intentionally, then we can also relax fully intentionally. It can really help us be in our bodies and let go of tension and help to bring down some heightened emotions as well. So to begin with, we're going to start with our hands. For this, I will say tight, tight, tight when I want you to be clenching, and I will also cue you to relax by saying release, relax, or let go. So to start with, again, this is going to be making fists with our hands. And when you're ready, go ahead and clench tight, 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 and release, relax, let go. Next, I'm going to go ahead and have you do the same thing, but with as many of the muscles in your arms as you can engage all at once. So with your arms, you're going to go clench tight, 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 and relax. Release and let go. Couple of breaths here. The next group of muscles I'm going to ask you to engage will be the muscles in your face. So this could look like a grimace or a really big grin, a big yawn, whatever you can do to engage as many muscles in your face as you can. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and do it tight, 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 and relax, release. Let go. Couple of breaths, and now we're going to move all the way down our body to our feet. I'm going to go ahead, clenching our feet and our toes as tight as we can. We're going to do that now. Tight, 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 and relax. Release. Let go. And last for today, we're going to go ahead and try to engage as many of the muscles as we can at once in our legs. So our calves, our shins, our thighs. When you're ready, go ahead and tighten. Hold it tight, 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 and release. Relax. Let go. Take a moment to linger here. Notice how you're feeling. Notice how your body feels. Notice if there's been any shift to your emotions. No right or wrong answers. Just checking in. Just noticing yourself. Just bringing a little mindful awareness to how that may have changed your state. Once you're ready, you can go ahead and just do any stretching that maybe your body feels like it needs after that. Right, rolling shoulders or neck, wrists or elbows, ankles, whatever feels good and right. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and open your eyes. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT and Me Podcast.